We welcome you to Introduction to Sociology 2, and today we shall be doing the unit on meaning, explanations, and overview of interpretive sociology. Let's go into our discussion. William Dilthey. Much of the space for humanist social thought was cleared by William Dilthey through his attack on the fundamental assumptions of positivism, as well as his formation of a critical method hermeneutics, by which the works of free consciousness, especially human consciousness, could be understood. We had been studying William Dilthey and how he, spearheaded the Neo-Kantian movement and the Methodenstreit that was later on proposed by Weber. How the debate started and how the wage of war between positivism and interpretive sociology had started for a long time. It was William Dilthey who also spoke of hermeneutics. Now, what is hermeneutics? Hermeneutics is a discipline, is a method of interpreting theories, texts, especially textbooks, Bible or wisdom books or any other text, the way of interpreting, the method of interpretation, the methodology, the very perspective is known as hermeneutics. So he was the one who went on robustly challenging positivism and its claim for supremacy based on the pinnacles of causality, logicality, rationality, absolutism, and its objective science that was supposed to be the absolute structures that was about to devise the absolute picture of reality. Dilthey's writings may be seen as a watershed between the 19th and 20th century thought. Like Kant and Hegel, he was born to a Protestant family, and Dilthey seemed destined for a theological career until his interest in history and philosophy turned him towards academics. So, there's one similarity between Dilthey and Kant and Hegel. Both were born in Protestant families. And though there was an attempt to channelize Dilthey towards theology, towards text writings, but despite that, because of his huge interest and unbound interest in philosophy and history, Dilthey came to this sphere of the debate on the essentialities and the wage of war between theory and philosophy and science. The first tenet of positivism is that the world is made up of out there, objectively knowable facts. And Dilthey undercut this notion by asserting that the subject matter of the human studies was not mere facts of the nature, but rather objectified expressions of the human mind. So, as positivist sociology always, furnishes the fact that it is all about out there, something which we can see with our perceptible senses. But Dilthey said no, it is also sometimes expressions of the human mind which cannot be seen, but they definitely constitute as one of the pillars of, the historical investigation of society, and therefore we must accept its claim for supremacy like any other natural sciences. The second central assumption of positivism is that these facts are explainable or determined by general causal laws. In contrast, Dilthey asserted that while we can explain the natural world, human action must be understood through an interpretive rather than a causal logic. So the causality has to be changed. X plus y is equal to xy, this cannot be said. And there must be some separate rules to determine what actually is the cause of that particular action. If not causal logic, then what else? This interpretism is what makes up this kind of analyze the meaning, the roles and the actions of the others, and to assume its consequences that makes and how individual responds to others' cues. That is what we are trying to find out in interpretive sociology, especially propounded by William Dilthey. In demonstrating and specifically describing such an interpretive procedure, Dilthey provided an epistemological and methodological grounding for a humanistic science of the person and of the social world. His ideas illuminate the works even of his critics, and his influence, though largely unacknowledged, continues to be widespread in all human studies. So, he wanted to deduce an epistemological and methodological framework for the social sciences based on the pinnacles of, internal state of mind, internal state of a man's mind and his consciousness. It is true that Dilthey is not studied as widely as we do of Durkheim, Weber, Marx, or Hegel. But definitely, Dilthey covers a huge spectrum in our understanding of society, especially the interpretive world. And Dilthey must be given huge credit for introducing us the areas of interpretive sociology so well, though he is not that popular as compared to others in the world sociology. In The Rise of Hermeneutics, Dilthey talks of a solution to this problem that was not a checklist of the techniques, but rather a part intuitive, part systematic interpretive method that he demonstrated in his historical writings and commented upon extensively throughout his later years. He's not saying that hermeneutics is a be all and end all of all problems. He's not saying that it is a checklist of all the solutions we have at our disposal. He's only saying that it is a way of interpreting the texts, way of interpreting our understanding. The methodology that is being proposed by hermeneutics will be of great use in understanding human conduct, especially the historical and ethical dimensions of the human conduct, which was not taken previously. And we have seen that even Immanuel Kant and Hegel, while they were talking about the large steps, the different steps of the research design followed by the natural science, they have kept behind very deliberately, maybe undeliberately, the ethical and historical conduct and the dimensions of the human conduct, as if human agency, human actions, human activities, they never popped up in their discussion of scientific research design. It was said that history was too arbitrary. History was too so unorganized, or history was not at all reorganized to legitimately call itself a science, and therefore the historical laws was never given the status of scientific laws. It was said only natural sciences have the power to determine laws, and therefore historical laws was never possible because history never comes or never enters into the domain of science. Historical investigation, any investigation about science and history was carefully xed off, cut off from scientific understanding. At the heart of this interpretive procedure or hermeneutic are the concepts of lived experience, objectification, and understanding. Hence, the term lived experience suggests neither merely experience nor life alone, but the involvement in the lived experience of some whole unit of meaning, as for example, a work of art, a love affair, or a revolution. Lived experience is very important, and it constitutes to be an essential element of hermeneutics and that of interpretive sociology. Now, lived experience is also used extensively in phenomenology, and it becomes an essential attribute of interpretive sociology. Now, what is lived experience? Lived experience are the choices that people make, the decisions that people make out of his own experiences of leading the life in that particular way. So, it is own way of doing things. That individual is not influenced, is not dictated by any authoritarian structures. It is, maybe he lives into a regimented structure, but his or her lived experiences matter. The decisions that he make, the choices that he take, and all the conscious decisions that he is supposed to take within that particular platform, that decides the lived experience of an individual that he goes through. So lived experiences are very important, and that is why I said interpretive understanding is important, because you are chalking down the lived experiences of an individual which must be known by him alone, because we don't belong to his life world. We don't know what has gone through that person. For instance, take the example of a shabby girl, staying on the pavements of Kolkata, maybe under the flyovers in Gariyahat or Baliganj, or any other place across the world. Do you know what exactly happens to her at night? Do you now know if she's ever being abused? Do you know the people who act around her and how judiciously they act towards her? Had ever she been the victim of any kind of abuse, molestation, any sort of inflicted violence? We don't know. That is what is her lived experience, which she alone will stay to reveal and tell us. And that is something which the positivistic instruments will not be able to capture. No amount of questionnaires or no amount of structured questionnaires, structured questionnaire. What is structured questionnaire? It is a kind of a questionnaire where everything is given in order. See, I tell you, there are two different kinds of questionnaires. Why am I saying this? Because this is the positivistic rendition of method and theory building. These are devices. So what happens in a questionnaire? It's number 1, what is your name? Number 2, what's your age? Number 3, what are your preferences? And sometimes to make the questionnaire, more closed, I also give you options. What kind of options will I give you? Say I'm doing a research on the slum girls of Metiaburus or any part of the world. And I ask them questions. How long had you been living on the pavement? Are you an orphan? Do you have your parents? And how do you fend yourself? And number 1, I'll say you are a rag picker. Number 2, I'll say you are a beggar. Number 3, I'll say you go to an orphanage to collect your food. Number 4, I'll say you collect the leftover food left by the people on the street. And I'll ask her to tick the thing from there. See, that doesn't work because that will not collect the lived experience of that girl. Maybe the girl kind of does something else to earn her living. Maybe she goes somewhere. Maybe she is titillated by somebody who gives her food. Maybe there's a kind woman on her street who gives her lunch every day, and you never know. So whenever you're collecting the lived experience, it's better you give them, you ask them to give their narrative. You give them a free license. Let them speak out on their own. So that is the only way we will be able to collect the lived experience of the individual, because I don't know what is happening in the life world of that individual and how her consciousness is being designed to make her own decisions and choices based upon her stock knowledge and based on her perceptions and how she interprets her understanding of reality. The importance of Weberian interpretation. Weber sought to demonstrate that in all the disciplines, including the natural sciences, the facts never speak for themselves, which is to say that they do not identify themselves, nor do they offer information on how the facts fit into the scheme of description, since this requires interpretations. In Weber's view, no science can be fundamentally neutral, nor can its observational language ever be theoretically independent of the way individuals interpret the subject matter. Weber went on to show that the social sciences must arrive at a methodology. Therefore, as I said, as Weber had been saying, that facts never speak for themselves. And what facts say, that must be interpreted. And most of the science, very interesting learners, we may say that sometimes science is also not value-free. Science is also a loads of meaning on itself. And it is biased. Why is it biased? Because somebody is going on the field and reporting news to me. Do you know whether he is neutrally able to observe the situation, or there is a lot of biases, there's a lot of unfavorabilities, a lot of his own juxtapositions and ethicalities and values that have gone into making that report? So how can you say that a report, a science that is being claimed that we collect through the facts around us is absolutely scientific and value-free and neutral? No, science cannot be value-free and neutral because a lot of ideologies go within it, and people go with kind of presumptions, and they go with baggages and loads of presumptions and ideologies, let me tell you this. Because science is every possibility, it will be kind of a loaded one. We were talking about ideal types and how ideal types help to give the distinction, place the distinction between the positive sciences and the interpretive sciences. Now, what is an ideal type, learners? Try to understand this very carefully. Ideal types are not ideal as we think it is to be. It is not the perfect solution to our problem. It is not a perfect model that has anything and everything under the sun. For instance, if I say an ideal type bureaucracy, if I say an ideal type marriage, because ideal types are things, they are benchmarks, they are standards, they are a kind of measuring rod, which is a juxtaposition of different elements which corresponds to reality, but not wholly matches to it. I cannot say that this is an entirely given perfect model of a boyfriend or a marriage. If I say what is a ideal type of a happy marriage, you won't be able to say, because it depends from people to people. It depends from family to family. It depends from individual to individual. What you can present is only a corresponding reality that is kind of closely matching to the reality, not the absolute blueprint of what is reality. So, learners, it's very important. Ideal type is a construct. It is not the role model that one should include every good things into it. It's not a perfect role model. It's a kind of near about approach to approach our concept of perfection. And it is the basic device through which we differentiate between the positivism and the interpretive sociology. Positivism will always look for the appropriate replication of the empirical reality, whereas interpretive sociology will say we cannot give you the exact reality because we don't know what exact reality looks like. We can only give you a device which somehow looks like reality, but it also depends on how you interpret, and that is what is the difference between the positivism and the interpretive sociology based on the idea of ideal type. So the example that Weber had said that it is a kind of an analytical accentuation of certain things that we find in reality. It is not the entire reality being placed to you on a platter. It is only a part of it. In this context, an ideal type is thus a picture of events, which approximates the reality of a given society under certain conditions of its organization. For example, if once again we take the concept of a city economy and construct a type, the general concept of city economy lends itself to type construction by an extension of its traits and social characteristics. Under these circumstances, the essential traits of a city economy may include such elements as rational market, a system of law based on statutes, the decline of magic and system of private property, etc. It is just an approximate accentuation of the reality. It just gives you a summary of the traits which you might find in a particular phenomenon, for instance here, the city economy. And what do you say? The urban structures, the lesser relevance of magic and supernatural things, more of bureaucratic structure, more of deviance, and less of kinship relations or less of primary relations in the society. So this is a type of generation or reproduction of the reality that I am trying to produce for myself. And I do not say that this is an absolute replica of the concrete reality around me. This is how, because when positivism says, it must say, oh, this must be this. There's nothing called little bit or little more. This is nothing called little happy marriage or more happy marriage. There is either a happy marriage or an unhappy marriage, nothing within it. But interpretive sociology is always for interpretations. What is happier for me may not be happier for you. So there's a scope for remodification. There's a scope for reimagination, and there is also a scope for a big continuum where there are scales of distribution. That is the reason we talk about inferential and descriptive statistics, where we say that there's a scale, and I might give you a statement, and then you may, opine on that. If I say, do you think in a happy marriage, having children is necessary, absolutely a compulsory idea? And then I'll give you certain options. Agree, somewhat agree, less agree, disagree, absolutely disagree. So this is an interpretive sociology. A construct used to elucidate the features of historical reality. As I say that, this is carried out by Weber thought by extracting essential traits or characteristics, which elaborate concepts by comparing them with the concrete features of the social structure. These traits are often compared to an ideal picture of social reality, and from this a workable type is formed. See, we are talking about the workable type. We are not saying that all the types are absolutely the replicas of the natural reality or the empirical reality. We talk about different models, and from every module, we will take out certain traits, and from that, we will construct a hypothesis. Okay, or might be an operationalization. How do we operationalize a concept? If we say that integration is very less or deviance is more among the young college goers. Okay, now how will you define deviance? How will you conceptualize it? You know what is deviance, but when you operationalize it, you will look for the traits and you will bring the traits together, and that will be weaved together to make the operationalization, because that will make the concept work. As you know, Weber has said, we are looking for a workable definition. Very good. We are looking for a workable definition. So we will take deviance definition from different places. We will club down everything together. We will put it into a pigeonhole. We will take some traits from there, and from there I will deduce a workable definition, and that is how ideal types work. And we're going to compare this with other ideal situations kind of a thing. What is deviance according to Durkheim? What is deviance according to Weber? And from there I'll come to a workable definition, taking some traits from them, and this is how I compare my definition with the reality. Now, what are the distinctive purposes of ideal types? According to Weber, the ideal type does serve several distinct purposes. First, it can be used to make judgments about whether the type of society referred to in a concrete reality actually exists, and its characteristics can be made clear and understandable. Second, it is an indispensable tool for the purpose of a comparative analysis, because things change over time. Third, while an ideal type is not a description of reality, it can be used to assist in reducing ambiguity about the empirical reality. And fourth, as a methodology, the ideal type leads to the formation of new concepts about the social and economic organization, inviting historical comparisons. So, ideal types are necessary. Why? Because they not only act as a measuring rod for comparison between societies, between different concepts, they also work in order to, reduce the ambiguity, to tell us what actually works, to make the concepts more clearly understandable, to make the concepts clearly comprehensive. That is the reason we work with traits. Okay, we work with characteristics. Another point is what the ideal types do. They help in inviting us to make new concepts, because we know that concepts change over time. And when we understand that, the working definition that we have proposed or that we have furnished is not very significant, then we will change our definition and might be will give a new definition to it. Maybe we'll see that the deviance definition that we had been working for the last 50 years or around 20 years is not working. So we have compared that. So that is what ideal types do. They compare things with the larger structures and they tell you whether your working definition is working or not. In case your working definition doesn't work, you will have to propose a new working definition depending upon the changes that the concepts have gone through. Weber's theory of social action follows directly from his discussion of the problems of methods from the social sciences, and he first developed a theory of social action in economy and society between 1911 and 1920. And historically, the term social action derives from the body of Weber's writings, which were concerned with developing a theory of society that was consistent with making judgments about the decisions the individuals make in their actions with others in the social environment. And this is what is the crux of his interpretive theory of social action. Because Weber's idea of interpretivism, you see, we are talking about interpretive sociology, right? And this is what is more associated with Max Weber. And Weber, while talking about this interpretive sociology, introduced it in his very famous work, Economy and Society, and there he introduced the idea of social action, where he says that actions are not the immediate cues, responses the individuals make to the cues, but rather the responses he shows based on his value judgments, on his idea of interpretation, how he interprets the situation, on his ideas of rationality. Accordingly, we have different kinds of rationality, like traditional rationality is there, and effectual rationality is there, instrumental rationality is there. It is based on the rationality, what you think should be the means to an end, your response to it, your interpretation to it, that you make the decision, that you think the thing is rational. And on the basis of it, you take the action, which is called human action, social action. So social action is programmed by individual. Weber began to take a position on the interpretive theory of social action by 1903, after taking the view that social sciences were different from the sciences which study the objective world of outside nature. Because the social science investigation must go beyond the observation to look at how individuals act. And once Weber was very assured that the two domains of sciences were different, he went for interpretive sociology, and in order to juxtapose his interpretive sociology with this new kind of a methodology that he has proposed because of the method and straight, which was a debate of the methods, he actually went for developing a full proposed theory, a full-fledged theory of social action, because social action, according to Weber, was his pinnacle and his the building block of his interpretive sociology. Between 1903 and 1907, Weber wrote several essays on methodological issues. He said that two of the essays which you must mention, one is The Roscher and the Nice and the Critique of Stammler, where Weber argued that the objective sciences of the outer world of nature had failed to treat the problem of what had referred to as a human inert state and understanding. And in the latter part of the argument, he claimed that the social sciences were concerned essentially what I had been saying about the inner states of the mind, about the interpretative understanding, the reflexive understanding, which we shall call Verstehen in the later on chapters, which very unfortunately the natural sciences domain couldn't do, or the natural science paradigm couldn't take care of. So because of this understanding, Weber reasoned human conduct is in principle distinct from physical event in the outer world, because the physical behavior of the things in nature, such as the action of the earth around the sun, does not involve any understanding. It is devoid of it. The distinction referred specifically to the fact that human beings understand the actions of others and interprets them. And therefore we talk about meaningful interpretation of acts. And these four concepts of social action, Verstehen, concepts for interpretive understanding, subjective understanding, these things have been started by Weber, but later on, as we have moved to other spheres of social sciences, we have also used them, applied them in other branches as well. Verstehen is the same thing. It is what you will think, putting yourself in the shoes of the other, which I had been saying already in symbolic interactionism, largely influenced later on by Mead and Blumer. But Weber had said it all before, that it is internal interpretive understanding of an individual. For instance, if I say I'm working on a coal mine workers, then you have to understand why the coal mine workers are, you're struggling in the mine. And their struggle might be sometimes collieries and those things are very remotely located, and they work very hard. This we can understand only if we put ourselves in the shoes of the other. Otherwise, from outside, I won't be able to understand why a mine worker acts and reacts that way. Maybe sometimes he has scopes of release and to move out, but then also he doesn't do. These are some of the contemporary trends. Nard Nolman is an assistant professor at the University of Duisburg-Essen, and he received a doctorate in sociology from the University of Münster, Germany. And he had worked as a publisher, and his scientific work also deals on interpretive sociological theories. Herbert Blumer, another person. George Herbert Mead, we have already read them, and their ways of looking into structure and agency, and how they look into structure being a straitjacket, coupling it with agency and fluidity and interpretation, that also goes a long way. So Mead's idea of significant others and the generalized others, and Blumer's idea of straitjackets and methodologies are also important. Explorative understanding of research, exploratory research and introspection is also important in understanding these kind of interpretive sociology. There are certain classical trends. Please go through these thinkers that I have mentioned. George Simmel, his idea of conflict sociology. Nanicki has done a wonderful work on the Polish peasants, on the immigration, how the immigrants feel. Harold Garfinkel's ethnomethodology is wonderful work of everyday life, how he unmasks that. Roland Robertson, interpretive understanding of Everett. Phenomenological sociology of Alfred Schutz, yet another wonderful work. He talks about intersubjectivity. He talks about the life worlds, which I have said in connection with the lived experiences of the girls. Nicholas Luhmann's intersubjectivity, Berger and Lachmann's social constructionism is very important. You can understand how people go on to construct their lives. Charles Taylor, Howard Becker's labeling theory, we have already done this in deviance, and how people go on to label others, how they think that this particular work is an act of deviance, and how they go on to accuse accuse the other person and, kind of institutionalize that particular allegation on him, how he goes for labeling. So these are some of the works that you can read and go through in order to greater interest in the work of interpretive sociology.